Okay, good morning, folks. Let's let the room get a little more packed. Let's see. I'm gonna do a quick share on our WeChat account. And we should be good to go after that. All right, let's get started. Oof, I should probably refresh. Let me refresh this. I'm gonna drop a notepad. 10K hours. Let's see here. All right. So early, I know. Oof, isn't it awful? All right, so this morning we are talking about the 10,000 hour rule, the 10,000 hours to learn anything. So, the first thing we're going to open up with here is that the 10,000 hour rule is not what people think it is. So there was a study done by a man and scientist known as Anders Ericsson. So within this study, Anders Ericsson, he discovered or he summarized that it takes about 10,000 hours of practice for specifically a person to become an elite violinist. So that's actually the sample size, the origin is like it's a study of elite violinists, like top level violinists. So on average, at least, it took them approximately 10,000 hours to become such high level violinists. Now the problem is, as media and press usually does, they sort of erased everything else about this study. They didn't emphasize anything other than it takes 10,000 hours to learn something. And ever since then, a lot of people have had this idea in their mind that it takes 10,000 hours to just learn to do something. 10,000 hours to learn how to swim, 10,000 hours to play guitar, 10,000 hours to learn how to sing, whatever, whatever you can think of, art, 10,000 hours. Which is really a pity, because let's take into consideration if it takes 10,000 hours, right? How long is 10,000 hours? Realistically, the average person may practice something for 1 to 2 hours, but let's be a little bit conservative about the number and say 1 hour a day. 1 hour a day, 5 times a week. So 1 hour a day times 5 times a week times 4. So basically, you will get to practice about 20 hours, 20 hours in a month. So if you need to practice 10,000 hours to get good at something, and we divide it by 20, it takes 500 months. Let's see, divide that by 12. So it takes 41 years. 41 years. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if my math is mathing correctly, but that doesn't seem very realistic. That doesn't seem very realistic. All right, so let's say they practice 1 hour every single day, nonstop, every day of the year. So we know one year has 365 days, right? So let's take the 10,000 hours and divide it by 365. So, I mean, that number looks a little bit better, 27.3, close to 28 years to learn to do something well. But now the problem is, if we look at examples in our everyday life, I'm sure you guys have met normal kids who are really, really good at different sports, different types of instruments, different arts. They're exceptionally good. And I'm not talking about child prodigies. I'm not talking about special children. I mean, normal kids who just practice regularly, right? If it takes 27 years, why are 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds so good at painting or playing instruments or doing sports? It doesn't make sense, right? So you really have to be skeptical and look at things critically when we're talking about this kind of stuff that is it is supported and backed by science, right? The 10,000 hour rule. But the problem is that even if it is backed by science, it is not reported in its entirety, right? A lot of important details were obviously missing when the press decided to run with the story about the 10,000 hour rules, about the 10,000 hours to learn anything. So, in reality, the study, like I said earlier, is specifically and only looking at violinists. How long did it take for a violinist to become elite? to become elite level or elite class violinists. Not to be good, not to be so-so, not to be better than most, but elite, a top level musician. So 10,000 hours to become a top level musician, I can understand that. I can get behind that. I think that does make sense. It can take a couple decades, right? But we need to also keep in mind, like anything, there is a point of diminishing returns. Oh, by the way, if any of you guys, because I can't type in this live chat, if you guys can write the difficult words in there so people can understand it better, please feel free. So, diminishing returns. Let's get into that a little bit. So, what is the point of diminishing returns? So, from the perspective of learning, the point of diminishing returns is when you are still putting the same amount of time, the same amount of effort into learning something, but what you are learning is very minimal. What you are getting back is less than it was before. So, this is to say, like this: if you were learning to play guitar, right, for the first time in your whole life, you are learning to play guitar, you will learn more about the guitar and how to play within your first 20 to 25 hours of study. You will probably learn the most as opposed to your 500-hour point or 600-hour point. You know, the more you learn after a certain point, the less you actually learn. And I know that sounds silly, but if we think about it, that's exactly what happens. So it's like, imagine you have a graph, right? And as you start learning a certain skill, the line on the chart is going up. It doesn't go straight up, but it feels like it's going straight up. But as your hours start building and you practice more and more and more and longer, then that line starts getting a little bit more straight. It becomes less vertical. It's not going up as straight as it used to be, and it's going a little bit more sideways. It's going a little bit more straight. The more time you spend, the more that you learn. And when we take this into consideration in applying the 10,000 hour rule, what the press was running with is, how long does it take to learn something? How long does it take to learn something well, good enough that it is practical for you to do or use on a normal basis, right? So if you wanted to casually play guitar with your friends or your family, if you want to go swimming at a swimming pool or in a lake, right? This is very different from saying like you want to go compete in the Olympics or play in an orchestra, right? Exceptionally different. So in reality, now I got to get you guys a different study to back this up when they actually do it. For most people, it would actually take between 20 to 30 hours to learn something well. To learn something well enough to be, generally speaking, within the top 10% or the top 20% of people who do that thing. So if you consider this, right, there's 8 billion people on the planet, if not more. Within any given country, there are several million, several hundred million people. The chances that 90% of the people play guitar are very low, exceptionally low, almost impossible, right? So the idea is, if you were to spend, hypothetically, 25 hours, only 25 hours to play the guitar, right? You learn for 25 hours and then you stop learning. At that point, you would still be far ahead of the majority of people. So let's see, let's look it up. We're gonna do a quick drop down. We gotta think about how to ask this question. Let's see, how long, or no, let's put how many hours. I think that's a better question. How many hours does it take to play guitar better than 90% of people. Let's see if we can pull up a number for this. You know what's funny? Okay, so this is the prompt that I used. I put on the search bar. How many hours does it take to play guitar better than 90% of people? And the first thing that comes up, the first thing is, quote, quote, there is a common theory that says 10,000 hours to master an activity. Okay, no, definitely not. All right, let's see here. So we have an answer. We have an answer from someone. Let's see what it says. Yeah, to become a master, sure. All right. So the amount of practice required to claim proficiency in playing guitar can vary significantly based on individuals' prior experience, natural aptitude, and dedication to regular practice. Okay, guys, this is not my answer. This is an answer that I'm reading from someone called Bot. It's a system bot, but I'm sure this guy wrote it. All right. So, for a beginner with no prior musical experience, it typically takes around 300 to 500 hours of consistent practice. So, basically, practicing every day or at least 5 times a day consistently. Good morning, Cherry. So, it takes basically daily practice for 1 to 2 years to develop basic skills and techniques to play simple songs and claim a basic level of guitar ability. All right, so let's run with this. 300 to 500 hours. Let's run with that to be able to play basic guitar, probably like the same way that I play basic guitar. Okay, enjoy the transit. So 300 or 500, let's go with the middle. We're going to put 400 hours. So yes, 400 hours, if you divide it into 365 days, it is about an hour a day, like an hour and 10 minutes, give or take. Good morning. Good morning to you. So yes, I would say 1 to 2 years with almost daily practice, you can learn most things and be better than 90%. You would be like in the top 10%. Let's see. Let me continue. Oh no. Let's see what the next one says. Oh, I see. That sounds good. So now, if we're going to be pessimistic, let's say that we're going to go with 500 hours. We're going to say it takes 500 hours to learn something well, something decent at a basic level, right? Even so, that is still only 5% of the 10,000 hour rule. In reality, I would argue that most people don't really care about mastering anything or most things, right? Most people, they just want to be good. They just want to be good at something, right? So let's say, like, oh, I want to be good enough that I can play the songs that I like on a guitar. So that's me. That's basically my mentality. Or I want to be good enough that I can swim in deep water and be safe. Okay, that sounds good too. That's pretty nice. I would say most of us don't really care about mastery. We don't care about the 10,000 hour rule. And also, it is very limited considering the sample size that they studied. We care about having the ability to learn something well. So I would definitely go with 500 hours. I think 500 hours, you have pretty good competency, like understanding of the thing that you are learning. So much so that you can probably even teach it at a very basic level. But in order to learn something well enough to be able to do it, to actually just do it, even just okay, I think 25 hours is fine. Literally 25 to 30 hours is okay. It's more than enough. So let's go over these talking points. And just so you guys know, even though I am spending a lot of time studying these things, I always generate my talking points, or I will look up certain sites to have the talking points, and then I expand on it on my own. Okay? So, what has brought me back to this topic? I'm still going through the interview with David Epstein and Stephen Bartlett of the Diary of a CEO. So, going through that interview, this guy, he just talks about so many awesome things, especially when it relates to learning. So, I really, really like watching this interview. It's a really, really good interview. So, one more time for anyone who didn't hear who it is. So, the person that they're interviewing, his name is David Epstein. So let me see if I can get his last name for you. So David, David, Epstein, Epstein, David Epstein. And also, this live stream is pre-recorded. So if you need to go back and check anything, you can just go into the replays on my channel. So if you follow the live stream and go there, you'll be good to go. You can find it. So let's go back to the talking points. No, I did. No, I didn't. I wish I didn't interview David Epstein. No, Stephen Bartlett interviewed David Epstein on the Diary of a CEO. So I'm saying I was going through that interview and taking notes and learning as much as I can from him, as I usually do. Okay, so let's go through this. My original point. So my number one point was the 10,000 hour rule. It is a study that was emphasized on elite violinists. So it's very, very limited. Okay, very limited study. I don't believe that the 10,000 hour rule actually makes sense. Next one, limited sample size. The study only looked at a small group of violinists at a music academy. So it's hard to generalize that to everyone. So let's say, for example, you have 5 kids in a kindergarten that you're observing for 3 months or 6 months or even 1 year. And from those 5 kids, you find that one of them is just really, really good at painting. He's like a really good artist, but the other 4 are just really bad, right? So from that very small sample size, you say, okay, 20% of kids in kindergarten are very good at painting. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. So typically I start up around 7:30, between 7:30, 7:45. But going in at 8 o'clock is okay, dude. You won't be missing much because at 7:30 I'm still setting up. Right. So if you observe these 5 kids in the kindergarten, you find that one of them is a very good artist. And then from that observation, you say, yeah, 15 or 20% of all children in kindergarten are artists. They're very good artists. That's a very horrible assumption because you've only observed 5 kids in a very specific kindergarten. So when we're looking at the 10,000 hour rule is something like this as well. Now let's do a little bit of backtracking before I get to the next talking point. Let's say, for example, you spent 200 hours learning something, and then you took a break for 5 years, and then you put another 300 hours in. Are you going to be able to continue from the same place where you left off? Absolutely not. It's highly unlikely, if not impossible, right? Stop here. It's highly unlikely, if not impossible. So what ends up happening, of course, as you guys probably already know, is that you're going to lose a lot of what you learned. Some things you're going to retain, so it will be a little easier to get back into it. I would definitely say that, but it will not be the same. It will definitely not be the same. I can tell you guys, I studied Japanese when I was in college, and I studied Japanese for like, I want to say something like 4 years, maybe about 4 years. And I have not used I have not used Japanese in like 12 years now, something like that, for a very, very long time. That's the point. Maybe even longer than that. So I can tell you for a fact, I do remember a lot of random phrases. I do still remember how to read most Japanese writing, but there's no way I can actually have a conversation with somebody. And if I had to pick up and study Japanese again today, I would have to start from like almost zero, right? I would be able to learn faster and be able to catch up to where I was before, but I would still have to burn tens of hours, if not more, just to get back to where I was. Exactly. You're exactly right. So they said, just like when you study English, if you stop for a long time, you need to pick it up again, right? You need to redo what you did before. On the bright side, it is easier the second time around, so that's good. You do still have things in like your subconscious, right? In the back of your mind, that long-term memory, you still have a lot of things that you learned in there, but unfortunately, you lose a lot of it as well. Yeah. So I can tell you this. I believe that the reason I'm even able to remember any Japanese today, which is not much, very little, but the only reason that I can remember to speak some Japanese and read some Japanese today is because I spent so much time around Japanese people and doing like meetups, language exchanges, hosting tourists and visitors and things like that. I spent a lot of time around people who speak the language. And honestly, I believe that is the only reason why I can still remember some things, right? Some There's going to be words that stand out and things that stand out that I can guess the general idea of what a person is talking about, but I don't actually know what they're saying. If I only studied, then I would remember nothing. I would remember nothing at all, for sure. So I would say, at least when it comes to language learning, it is really important that you have as much exposure as possible to the language that you're trying to acquire, at least until you get to a level where you are confident enough that you can express yourself and say the things that you want to say. So what I've been trying something similar, but with a non-language skill for for swimming, for example. So if you take my phone and you look through my social media, right, you'll find that there's a lot of videos about swimming, a lot of shorts videos about treading water, freestyle swimming, sinking to the bottom, floating, breathing techniques, all this stuff. Am I studying it? Really? Am I focused on it? No, not really. But I've made it a point that whenever I see something come up about swimming, that I watch it and that I pay attention to it. Because next time I go to the swimming pool or a beach or whatever, subconsciously, I believe that I will be able to at least try some of those techniques or some of the things that I saw passively in the video content. So I'm trying to see like if this would work or not. Like, can I acquire a new physical skill or a new physical technique within the skill by just looking at content, right? Looking at content, listening to the techniques, looking at people swim, listening to people talk about swimming, am I able to even try or attempt or apply any of this stuff when I go swimming next time without having like a coach or a teacher telling me specifically what to do? And like I said, I only had this idea because it's the same thing that we've done for years when it comes to language learning, right? If you are learning Spanish, for example, watching Spanish TV shows is going to be very helpful. It's going to be incredibly helpful. If you're watching a TV show that you think is funny or interesting, even if you don't understand everything, it doesn't matter. You're going to be able to passively pick up some words, some phrases, some idioms, some expressions by observing other people. Okay, excuse me. Let's go to our talking point number three. So, talking point number three, focus on mastery. The 10,000 hours were about becoming the best of the best, not just getting good at something. Most people do not need to reach an elite level. So, whenever someone tells you that it takes 10,000 hours to learn something, please correct them and let them know, hey, that is not correct. That actually is not part of the study. That is not what the study was trying to emphasize. That is something that the media and the press emphasized so they can get a shocking headline, right? Because think about it. If it took 10,000 hours just to learn anything, then you wouldn't want to learn anything because that means it's going to take you 2 to 3 decades just to learn one thing. That's ridiculous. Realistically speaking, that means that in a lifetime, you can only learn to do maybe four different things well, realistically speaking, in the interest of time. So, yeah, when it comes to the 10,000 hour rule, it is about being the best of the best, about being elite level. Great, nice and sweet. So, let's go to talking point number four. The 10,000 hour rule doesn't apply to everything. The rule might work for specific skills, like playing an instrument, but other skills can be picked up much quicker. Now, again, specific skills like playing the instrument at an elite level. Okay, see you tomorrow, buddy. Next one, 20 to 25-hour rule. I'm going to say it's the 25-hour rule. So, research shows that with focused practice, you can become good enough at something within 20 to 25 hours. Man, I 100% support this. I'm 100% behind this 20 to 25-hour idea. So, here's the thing. If you guys remember, last Friday I was talking about deliberate practice, right? If you spend 20 to 25 hours of deliberate practice learning something, right? Analyzing yourself, analyzing your practice, and focusing on small goals to improve on, within that 25-hour period, I guarantee, I am 100% sure you would be much better at doing that thing than someone who practiced for 200 hours or 300 hours without deliberate practice. In reality, it makes all of the difference. I really believe it makes all of the difference because mindlessly doing something on repeat for hours at a time can never have the same effect as being actively involved, consciously involved in what you are doing for 20 to 25 hours, especially when you have set some small goals to accomplish during each session. Mhm. So Annie says 10,000 hours for sure. You can master anything you want to learn. How about the minimum hours? So this is the thing about this study is that we're trying to emphasize that not necessarily that the study is flawed, but the marketing, let's say this, the marketing behind the study is very flawed because the study has been sort of sold to people as yes, mastery. But the reality is that the sample size of the people that were being studied, number one, the sample size is way too small, right? It's just a number of musicians. And number two, the range is very limited because they were all violinists, right? They were all violinists who were working to become elite class violinists, right? There isn't enough data or enough information within that study to say, hey, yes, it takes 10,000 hours, approximately 10,000 hours to master anything. That's not realistic, right? It's not realistic information. In order for us to be able to realistically understand how many hours it takes to master something or to learn something at a basic level, you would have to follow hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, different countries, different backgrounds, practicing different skills, and put all of that data, cross reference it against each other to be able to get something close to what the number might be, right? So the thing is like, if you spend 10,000 hours in Canada learning how to snowboard versus 10,000 hours in South America trying to snowboard, I think the results are going to be very different, right? So this is the idea: is that we cannot just take these studies for face value because sometimes there's a lot of information missing. There's a lot of details that are missing, not only within the study but within the way that the press or the media actually gives the information out. Because the focus is on the clickbait. The focus is to get a shocking headline, is to get a reaction so people can go into the article or go into that report and see what it's about. But the information is way too limited to realistically say how long it takes for someone to get into mastery. Okay, let's go to talking point number 6. Learning curves vary. The learning curve. Good morning, Aniver. Everyone has different learning curves depending on the skill, their background, and their natural abilities. So we do need to consider something. If you are genetically, naturally 2 meters tall versus someone who is 1.2 meters tall, I think that the range of time that you're going to need to learn how to play basketball, whether it is at a basic level or at a mastery level, the range is going to be very different, right? It's going to be much easier for someone who's 2 meters to play, practice, shoot, to do anything almost in basketball than it is for someone who is significantly shorter, almost half of his size. So this is something else that we need to take into consideration when it comes to the learning curve, is that even genetically, even naturally, in the way that we were born, and how our bodies are created, right? Those things are going to be able to affect the way that we learn certain skills, certain sports, abilities, etc. So there is no way to say like every human learns this thing in the exact same rate. I don't know. I don't think that that sort of skill exists. Something that every single person can do or learn at an equal level does not seem realistic. Okay, so let's go to number 7, quality versus quantity. It's not just about time spent. The way you practice matters a lot. Efficient, focused practice can shorten the time it takes to get good. I like the ending of that because it's like get good. Only I don't think anyone here will know the reference though. Okay, so I talked a lot about this on Friday. We were talking about deliberate practice. Deliberate, Deliberate, deliberate practice. So if you really want to know about how can you learn something or practice something better so it's actually worth your time, then you can look at our live stream from Friday morning. And there's a lot of details about deliberate practice there that we talk about. So we don't need to get too much into it right now again, but simply put, being consciously involved in analyzing what you are doing when you practice and setting small goals will make it so that you can progress and develop significantly faster than if you practiced without deliberate intent. Okay, number 8, the problem with averages. 10,000 hours is an average, not a hard rule. Some people might need more, some people may need much less to get really good at something or to achieve mastery. Again, we've already covered that part. There's no way for us to know exactly how many hours it will take for each and every single human to be able to do something. You might even emphasize that it is going to be significantly easier and the progress would be significantly faster for a man to do powerlifting and weight training than for a woman to do powerlifting and weight training. And why is that? Well, because of course, the men have the support of the testosterone behind them, which is going to help us to be able to develop our muscles and strength much quicker than how a woman would be able to. The women also have testosterone. It is not to the same degree or level that men do. So this is just another reiteration or emphasis on this point. So there is a bit about that says talking point number 9, deliberate practice myth. So here it goes. Now we're gonna contradict myself. While deliberate practice is key for improvement, it doesn't guarantee success after a set number of hours. So we're not looking for the success part. We're talking about what is more effective. Just regular practice without focus or deliberate practice with analysis and goals. I would say if you practice something for 10 hours, you use deliberate practice, and you don't feel that you progressed well enough or that your level is still very low for how hard you practice, then I am willing to bet that 10 hours of non deliberate practice would be much worse, would be significantly worse. Hmm. Thank you, Betty. Very sweet, very kind of you. All right, let's go to number 10, motivation and interest. I think this is a good point that to end on. This is really good. So talking point number 10, motivation and interest. People who are motivated and genuinely interested in something tend to learn it faster, often way below that 10,000 hour mark. Yes, 100%. So, as an entrepreneur, one of the things that we often say is if you want to get into business and if you want to get into something, you should get into something that you enjoy doing, that motivates you, that interests you, that gives you some sort of drive. Because if you get into something purely for money, that doesn't actually interest or motivate you, then you're not going to do it for a very long time. You're more likely to fail. So the idea behind the motivation and interest part is so that you have a drive when you fail, because you're going to fail. That's part of the game. That's part of the progress. You're going to fail. And being motivated and interested and engaged in the thing that you are learning, practicing, the business you're starting, the job that you're doing, right? That's what's going to keep you going. That's what's going to give you the resilience to try again and try again until you're able to succeed or develop yourself. So that is the thing, even outside of business, even outside of your career, when it's something very basic like practicing an instrument, practicing some sort of other skills, yes, motivation and interest is a huge driving factor. Because if you're not really interested, you're not really motivated to learn that thing that you're learning, when you start hitting those walls and you start failing, it's going to be very hard to continue. It's going to be very difficult to pick yourself back up and try again if you don't have that motivation behind you to keep you going. All right, ladies and gentlemen, 谢谢你们那么早再过来听我说这 Oh my God, you're so sweet. Anyway, um, let's see. We should be good to go. We have about 10 minutes left. We can just end early. But if you guys have any questions or any comments or anything you want to share now before we close out, let me know. It is, let's see, mark the dates. Tuesday morning, September 10th. We are ready to start the workday. So if there is nothing else, we're going to leave it right here. 10,000 hours, ladies and gentlemen, is a myth. It does not take you 10,000 hours to learn anything. There are a lot of varying factors, and the study itself never makes the claim that it takes you 10,000 hours to learn something well. It was something that was created to say that, hey, it takes 10,000 hours on average, to become an elite level violinist, to reach mastery as a violinist. The study is too narrow and too specific to apply to the general public. Okay? So if someone tells you it takes you 10,000 hours to learn a thing, let them know that that is not true. Right? At a very basic level, at an understandable level, it will take you 20 to 25 hours of deliberate practice to learn something. And to be more or less comprehensive, about 500 hours is like your top cap, 400 to 500 hours. So 1 to 2 years of regular daily practice, about 1 hour a day. Mhm. All right, folks, we're going to leave you with that. Hope you guys have a really good day. Have a good morning. Have a good work day. Take it easy out there. Hopefully, no more rain and typhoons for the rest of the week. Bye bye. Stay amazing. What we learned. From ChatGPT is that answers become cheap. If you want an answer to something, you ask a machine. As answers become cheap, will become
Sometimes valuable is asking the right questions, having the right mindset, and that is really what's happening is that answers